Well, I changed my shirt and moved some things around behind me. So, therefore, it must be 2 or 3 weeks later and time for another IBF On Demand podcast. Let's get to it. Welcome. Another episode of IBF On Demand. I'm your never-aging and seems just like yesterday host, Eric Wilson. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thanks for the follows and subscribes. Of course, LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you get the podcast, I am there, and you can find me there, and I hope you follow and share that content as well so we can continue to grow this network. I want to thank Arkiva allowing us to grow and share this content. Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thank you, Arkiva, for being the sponsor for these podcasts. As I said, there's a lot going on in 2025. Check out ibf.org. You can actually follow them on LinkedIn as well. And also, I do want to mention IBF On Demand, this podcast, we have our own LinkedIn channel. There's quite a few of you already there. I'd love for you more to be there as well. So I know I'm asking you to follow this, follow that, follow this, but please do actually go onto LinkedIn. Besides following me, follow the LinkedIn channel as well because we have special content that I'm only sharing there. So check that out then as well. IBF On Demand, LinkedIn channel. Please check that out. Dedicated page to this podcast and a lot of great content there. Full disclosure, I'm recording this podcast about 20 minutes after I did the last one, or maybe 20 minutes before I'm doing the next one. Somewhere in between, I'm recording this podcast. So with the power and magic of production, we're actually showing this a couple weeks later, but they're recorded back to back. Just a little bit behind the scenes secret. But the audience, you are 100% real and part of this. As I said in the last episode, or 20 minutes ago, I was recently in Orlando at our flagship conference, IBF conference. But I know not everyone was able to make it, even though there was quite a few there. I said I think I saw all 12 of my listeners there. There was a lot of people who couldn't make it then as well. So we wanted to continue to share a little bit of that content with you. Now, the downside, once again, you aren't able to ask questions. You can comment below, but you couldn't ask questions in real time. But the good news, once again, I was the moderator for those leadership forum, and I'm moderating this podcast then as well. And you are actually getting a taste of the subject matter experts that sat on the panelist. There was 3 great panels. There was 15 wonderful subject matter experts. This is part 2, the second panel we did, and the second thought leader that I'm bringing to you. Today, we've got another fantastic guest, someone who was a senior director of S&OP with one of the world's largest bakery companies in the U.S. with an iconic brand. Meredith Cannon, she was the lead demand planning and S&OP teams across multiple industries. Currently, she's the senior director of S&OP at Bimbo Bakeries. Prior to this, she worked at great brands like Campbell's, Ball Corporation, and L'Oreal. She has a BA in economics, always insightful, and played a big role in the recent IBF flagship event in Orlando. Please help me welcome Meredith. So welcome, Meredith.
Hello, Eric. Happy to be here.
Yes, it was great seeing you and great having you back on and being able to share a little bit about what we talk about at the Leadership Forum with the general audience. I'm excited to be able to do this.
Yeah, same. Yes, super happy. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, so it was a great panel, great discussions we had. A lot came out of it. Some of the questions that posed at the Leadership Forum from the audience, or me as the moderator, I wanted to be able to ask you directly, and you be able to share some of your insights directly with this audience. So that's kind of what we wanted to accomplish today. So the first one we're talking about is cross-functional collaboration. Collaboration was really topic in all 3 of our panels we had. We're talking about collaboration. how do you ensure it plays a role in demand planning processes then as well? So that's my first question is collaboration. How do you really bring it into the demand planning process?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think when it comes to collaboration, the demand step is really where the meat of the collaboration is happening. Like in my company right now at Bimbo Bakeries, we're going through an IBP S&OP implementation, and the way I presented it to folks on the demand review step is, guys, this is the biggest line on the P&L, right? Like we're talking the gross sales line, biggest line. So we really need to make sure that's important. That is solid, and we need to make sure we got the right people having the right conversations at the right time. So as far as collaboration goes, this one is the demand review is the most important. The thing you have to make sure you're doing is assigning the right roles and responsibilities. Assign people to bring in the right inputs, the right consistent inputs month over month. And I think one of the biggest things is that helps you do is just manage everybody's expectations. Like everybody wants to be able to just rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. I know as a salesperson every month, Meredith's gonna come in and she's gonna ask me what's happening with distribution, what's happening with our promotional activity. So I think that's really crucial is just set those expectations up front. Make sure it's consistent what you're asking them for. Keep it really simple. Like don't make this too hard for folks. Like for marketing and sales, like they're in a ton of other things during the day. Like forecasting is like just this little piece of what they're doing. Little right. So you have to be mindful of that, right? So like when you're thinking about collaboration, like you got to be mindful of like where you as a planner are fitting in to their world. So I think like when I think about collaboration, it's just really like manage expectations with them, um, manage the inputs that you're asking them for, keeping it simple, um, and like really trying to understand from a business driver's perspective, like what are the really key things. So also keep it short when
Yeah.
you think about collaboration too. Like it's really we don't need to boil the ocean when we're doing this stuff. So that to me is the best course.
Okay, so it was great there. You already talked about how do we demand planning, bring in collaboration, and you mentioned demand planning is that first step in your S&OP journey for a lot of organizations is really building out good collaboration, good demand planning process. So my next
Yep.
question then would be, which we heard was aligning the demand planning to the organizational goals. You have an S&OP IBP process, you got demand,
Hmm.
you got collaboration. How do you align those to really the organization or the strategic goals of the organization?
Yeah, and this is a tough one, and I think that I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done not so well, and I think this is where I think finance to me plays a really strong part in this because finance is that person who's translated the strategic goals down to just numbers, right? So it's sometimes it's tough when you talk about strategic goals. It's like, gosh, like, like for us right now, like we're trying to grow salty snacks for our businesses, or we want to, we're trying to grow market share in this, and this, and that's that, or we want to be a more sustainable company. So like stuff like that, like strategic goals, when you put it out there like that, they need to get translated down to something like something that people can actually measure against and like is so like we're talking when we get into these monthly forums, we can talk this stuff and everybody can understand it, and that to me is where finance plays a really large part in the conversations. Like they need to be in the portfolio step, in the demand step, certainly in the supply and the integrated reconciliation step or S&OP steps, where they're making sure at all points during this process we're not getting off track of those strategic goals that have been translated down to financial obligations. And so finance certainly plays a role. I would also say like this is where you need the strong leadership from the top. You got to have your general managers, your presidents playing that role of saying, look, guys, like this is all fine and great what you guys have rolled up here and what you're presenting, but that's not the direction that we're going in, or at this moment in time, like, remember we talked about sustainability as a strategic goal. I need you to prioritize, getting waste down, would be
Mhm.
one when I think about sustainability. Or, hey, that packaging redesign project that we're working on, that's that's got to feed the priorities. That's the most important thing when we look at like the 5 things we needed to go do over the next 3 to 5 years. So the I think that the general manager plays a really important role. How they translate it down through the organization, I think a lot of that tends to stay with finance, and that you need that strong brand finance partner in these conversations.
Okay. Now you mentioned that you are at a S&OP implementate large transformational project that you're currently
Hmm.
working on. It's interesting to hear about. Now with that, Bimbo Bakeries, I mean, operates on a pretty massive scale. So
Hmm.
the question then was, how do you really integrate S&OP technologies, this transformation, and a forecasting process without disrupting all the existing flows and the day-to-day business that because they're successful now, you're making them more
Yeah.
successful, but how do you really not disrupt what's happening to but still
Yeah.
implement a lot of these new processes?
Yeah. And this is, and so you talked about technology, and that one, for and this so I will say this specifically for Bimbo Bakeries. This would apply to, when we did this at Campbell's or at Danone. Like, a lot of this is sort of rinse and repeat, where you you start with the process first, right? Like, we all know this. Like, it's where we all know, like, people and process first, technology second, because the technology piece does end up being the disruptor. Like, that's the thing that really can throw people off. So my advice and what I've seen work really well is, don't try to go all in with, like, all right, we're going to go launch S&OP IBP. Let me go, like, Google, tell me, like, show me where the best tools are for S&OP IBP implementation. Don't do that. You can do this without the technology. You want to be mindful of the technology. You want to know what's out there, but don't let that be the thing that is going to stall you, because it will stall you. Like, you will
Mm-hmm.
spend years talking about the technology, because that's just where we are with a lot of the technology right now. And I think the most important thing when you're launching, implementing these processes, is visibility and transparency. And so that is, to me, something that the tools, like, I've seen a lot more recently with the tools on forecast explainability, like, getting to the point where you're like, I don't need the black box. I gotta have something that shows me the assumptions really clearly, because that's what's going to make SNOP move forward. People seeing, people understanding. Um, so don't try to do the technology piece right away. Um, but I think, like, keeping it in mind of, like, here's how all these connections will come will come in at some point in the process, is probably the best way to do it. It's like, we went through at Campbell's, like, we went through uh, 2+ years after implementation, when we said, okay, look, we understand now where these connections are clunky. We can't scenario plan really well. Like, that's a tough one for us to do on an Excel spreadsheet that I then email to somebody, and then they look at and they respond on an Excel sheet and send it back. Like, that's hard. So try not to. So scenario planning is one where, like, all right, we identified that through working through this over a period of time. Like, that's a sticky one. Maybe there's some tools that can help us, and there certainly are. So scenario planning, or um, just being able to, like, silly stuff, like being able to send the forecast that we do to finance,
Mm-hmm.
to supply. Like, are all these things connected? Like, really foundational stuff. Yes, you don't want to start with, like, that's got to be our limiting factor, but there's stuff out there that can help you, and there's stuff that can make sure that these systems are talking, they're talking at the right level to each other. So again, important to be mindful, but make sure you've got the right visibility and transparency in your inputs and your way of working first.
Now, I hear transparency coming up a lot. Came up in the last one. It seems to be a term, and it came up in the leadership forum as well. Transparency. Besides collaboration, transparency was
Yeah.
the other key word there. So, I mean, how does transparency play a role then in demand planning and forecasting? What's its role in demand planning?
Gosh, I think this is where I have some passion around this one, Eric, because this ties into what I talked about in the leadership forum with the consumption based forecasting. It really, and again, I go back to the um, don't don't think that when you implement demand reviews, or even if you're doing demand reviews and you're trying to improve upon them, don't necessarily go to, well, we need to go find the best fancy stat model to do this. You can do the most important thing when you're coming up with a demand plan is the transparency. Like that's the most important thing. So you have to be building your forecast in a way that people can understand it. Like if I were to ask you, like in an elevator pitch, your 10 seconds, like with the CEO, like what's driving our demand plan, everybody should be able to understand that. And then it's also very visible in all of the builds we have. Like it's, hey, I'm doing more promotions. I've got more new innovation year over year. We're taking price. Like there needs to be your 5 bullet points that you say this is what's driving growth or decline in our business. And that's the stuff that you need to be documenting and having people engage on in your monthly forums. And you have to build your forecast that way. So that's we talked about collaboration at the beginning. Ask that salesperson every month to come in with a distribution plan that says, here's where I'm going to go grow points of distribution. Ask him or her where they're going to be promoting and how much more versus a year ago. Like those are just like really basic things. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Like that, it's the conversation. That's the most important thing that we can do for ourselves is have the conversation so that then we all leave that room and say, all right, I know what those 5 things are going to be. And it's transparent. You see it, it's documented. That's how I've built the forecast. Anybody could go in and look at it and be like, yep, got it. That CEO who was like, this much time for planning. Like that person can say, all right, I see your sheet, like, got it. I'm very clear on what the assumptions are that go build my plan and done.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. I mean, demand planning is not for the faint at heart. I mean, the best demand planners I've seen are the ones that, I mean, don't embrace air, but don't mind talking about air because it exists.
Yeah.
They don't take it personal. And some of the best answers they have is, I don't know. I mean,
Right.
instead of
That's
making
it.
things up. I mean, those are good demand planners are the ones that are transparent and have honest dialogue about what they have and what they're seeing and have those
Yes.
conversations so people can make decisions. I love that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I know, and then where it all ties in from an S&OP perspective is you got to know where you are. Like, so you got to be transparent with where you are. So everybody's got to know where are we starting from, because then we can go solve. So then that's the next piece on like the transparency and collaboration is, all right, well then once we've known that information, what do we go do about it? Because that's what your general managers, your presidents really care about. It's like, great, cool. Like this is where we're at. I understand we're going to be down year over year. You've laid that out for me perfectly on why that is. Now what? Like now what are we going to go do? And so then you can have that conversation where if you don't build that trust first, you don't have that transparency initially, you won't get to the next most important step, which is now what do we do?
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned one of the topics you actually talked about outside of the leadership forum was consumption-based forecasting, and it's a passionate topic for you. And it's a great presentation as well. So with that, organizations looking to implement consumption-based modeling, I mean, where do they start? A lot of companies, it's all, here's my historic sales. That's what I'm forecasting off of. How do you transition
Yeah.
from that to a consumption-based type model?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is get everybody to a point, all, and I should say specifically your planners, like your demand planners, they gotta know the point of sale data. They gotta know the syndicated data. Like, get familiar with that consumption data, understanding like, all right, we go ship a bunch of product to a retailer or distributor. What happens after that? That's just getting everybody to the point where they really understand the whole chain. I think that is really fundamental, and that's a shift for a lot of demand planners, is moving from that internal mindset where I'm looking at orders, or even sometimes a signal like, oh, like, don't do that. Like, so it's just, yeah, they're very internal focused. You got to shift them to an external view of the world. And that is first, like, you got to get everybody, and I say everybody, but most of the time your marketing folks, your sales folks, they're in it. Like, they're seeing it. They live that on a daily basis. They live the point of sale data. So get your planners on board with them. They got to be speaking the same language with them. And then, after you've gotten your demand planning group comfortable, then they can start to facilitate these conversations with the marketing and sales groups. And the next thing to do would be start talking what those demand drivers are. Like we were saying before, like that transparency on your assumptions. What are the things that drive our business one way or another? For the consumer products groups where I've lived, it's the promotional activity, it's the spend we're going to infuse, it's the marketing spend, it's the price we're taking, inventory. Like, those are our drivers. For other businesses, there's other things, long-term contracts, or something along the lines of like, just any kind of like distribution changes that people are seeing. Like, that's that's the stuff that needs to be foundational, and it needs to be foundational across the business. Get your entire organization rallied around, here are the building blocks. Like, here's the building blocks we're going to go talk, and here's how they drive consumption in our business one way or another. Like, they get them, like when we talk promotions, like, hey, that's going to go show up in our consumption data in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start to model it out. We see where the history has been, and then we start to model out those assumptions going forward. So I think there's some fundamental training that needs to happen on the demand planning side first. Get alignment on your drivers. What are you going to go talk with people? And then like the third thing for me is, like, again, don't overthink this. Like, this can be this can be simple. Like, just put it in an Excel document that people can react to. Like, it's visible. That's the important thing. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. It can be stupid, the stupid version in Excel. Like, you can do that. So that would be, and then from there you're getting everybody rallied around, bringing in those inputs in the same way, consistently, same way, month over month.
Now you
And you
mentioned
can track
bringing in
against
the
it.
yeah, you mentioned bringing in the inputs in the similar way, same way. One of the things I've seen companies struggle with, you say, yeah, keep it simple, but the levels of aggregation, I'm getting
Yeah.
data in at one level, sales are talking another level, marketing's talking another level, I'm planning another level, I need to communicate a different level. That seems to be the complicating factor for a lot of organizations. They get
Yes.
hung up in the aggregation part of things.
Oh gosh, Eric. Yeah, that is one of, when we did this at Campbell's, and same thing at Danone, and we're working on it right now at Bimbo. It's one of the hardest things to do, is the level of aggregation. And my tip for folks is, you got to keep this, start as high as possible. Nobody will ever come to you and be like, oh, you know what? We're doing too much work. Like, I need to go, can we ag this up? Nobody will do that. Everybody will want to go lower. So you want to start them high. Like, start talking promoted price group. Don't talk SKU. Don't talk SKU in these meetings. Like, like you guys have preached that. Like, and when we talk S&OP, we're not down to that level. We're talking a higher level of aggregation. Same thing with consumption-based planning. Talk at a higher level of aggregation. Start at the promoted price group. And I say promoted price group because this is also the language that sales is talking. They go and promote at a certain level within the product hierarchy. So talk to them at that level. Go. maybe I could say this more generally, go meet people where they are. Like, let's not try to bring a level of aggregation in that doesn't make sense. The sales folks won't ever be able to give you input at that level. So don't do it. Like, they don't talk skew, stop it. Like, don't talk skew. And so, but then that's an important piece of the process, is how we get it from up here where, oh, great. Like, we got this great forecast sitting up here at like a total, goldfish level, or like goldfish multi-pack level. How do I get it down to my supply chain partners? That's where the demand planning team is. And plus the demand planning team, plus that's where your system should really be, your tool really needs to be doing the lift for you. Like, if you don't have a tool that can take a product group level forecast and disag it properly down, like, go talk to somebody. There are lots of partners out there, a lot of tools for you, like, that do this really well. And like, that's what the tool should do. That's the heavy lift. And then your planners are just managing the exceptions where, like, oh, that didn't flow to the right bucket. Let me go touch it. But other than the exceptions, you got to rely on your tool to help you with that disaggregation.
Well, it's great speaking with you. There's a lot of great insights. I wish we could keep going, but unfortunately, there's people's attention span's only so long, so I got to keep the podcast within 30 minutes.
Shoot.
But it was great. It was great insights, and I'm hoping I get to see you at a future conference, and hopefully this encourages others to come out and hear some of the things you have to say at a future conference then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so. I hope to see you in Florida again next year.
Yes, I'll see you then. Great.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. That was a great interview and truly gave listeners some actionable strategies on how to integrate consumption-based technology, demand planning, S&OP into your daily workflow and business. I love what she talked about, Lori, the aggregation at the end there. It really is a key and something you have to focus on in working with supply, working with sales, working with executives. And I loved her approach of starting as high as you can. Really minimizing some of that uncertainty, but bringing in the insights that people talk about. But critical to your demand planning role was being able to disaggregate those to outputs other people need inside the organization. It was a great lesson there that she was able to elaborate on. The other side that she mentioned that I've said multiple times, it was a standout lesson, was embracing that outside in thinking. Too many times we really focus too much on the inside out. We focus on the data we have available, and then try to extrapolate out patterns and hoping people come and buy them. Well, guess what? There's a whole big world outside of your organization, outside of your four walls. There's a whole big world out there. Start tapping into that, but it does take a mind shift. And she mentioned that as well. That really at the heart of what you're looking at being able to do is finding those actionable insights outside of your organization that bring in information that are leading indicators of what's going to happen in the future. If we get focused everything on what's happened in the past, we're going to miss the opportunity of what's going on now or what's going on tomorrow. To get there, we really need to transition from that inside out to an outside in type of mentality in your organization. This isn't just about historic sales. It is a mindset. It is about consumption data. It is about leading indicators. It is about predictive analytics and bringing in other real-time and other data, translating into actionable insights for your demand planning, and then being able to react or at least create alerts or other types of plans that you can now be proactive. You can no longer let your business manage you. You need to start managing your business, driving what the consumer wants and driving what the markets need and are asking for. Well, that's a wrap. I'm going to go change my shirt again and record maybe another podcast, or maybe go back and re-record a podcast I did before. My name is Eric. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thank you, Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thank you, Arkiva, for being a great sponsor for this. I hope you can come out to a conference. I hope you've got some insights that there's a lot of valuable information that are shared at these conferences as well. As I said in episodes, there's a lot of advantages: learning, sharing, networking, advancing. That's really what IBF is all about. Learn, share, advance. Personally, you have the opportunity to come learn, grow professionally, but you also have the opportunity to share as well. You can share in your own career, but also the field, and then advancing the field as a whole. Great networking opportunity, great opportunity for yourself. Hopefully you come out to these conferences. And remember, when watching these online or listening in a car or in between episodes, no matter how you're consuming these, don't forget, wash your hands.